Hello, everyone, and welcome to another ReBookulously Goodreads discussion brought to you by First Presbyterian Church of Hastings, Nebraska. We are in the midst of reading this book. It's called Home. It's by this person, Marilynne Robinson. This is the fourth discussion. I think it's the second sort of open conversation that we've had. If folks are intrigued by what they hear, you can find our previous discussions on the church's YouTube page. I'm Damon. I'm one of the pastors at First Pres Hastings. And that seems like enough for introduction. Away we go, just so everybody is kind of on roughly the same page. We'll try to sort of stick to like page 200 and before. So the most recent thing that I got to was the Sunday dinner. Excuse me. The Sunday dinner with Reverend Ames and Lila and Robbie, I think is how they refer to their child. And of course, Jack and Glory, who we found out was almost, or I found out was almost named Roberta. And from there on out. So I don't really know where to start, how to start, but we can't help but talk about Jack. So does anybody, do you like Jack more? Do you like Jack less? Jack Moore is an actual person that some of us know, so that wasn't maybe the best way of phrasing that. Yeah, go ahead, Jane.
Okay, well, the way I read it, I started reading it as a modern day prodigal son. And so Damon is the prodigal son, and Ames? Who's the what is the guy that doesn't like Jack? Is that Ames?
Yeah, Reverend Ames.
Okay. Yep. Ames is the elder brother. And I've had a lot of sermons about it. So they say that the most fault lies with the elder brother who can't forgive. And so he's really sort of the villain of the story, because he won't forgive Jack. And also, I got to say, there's a surprise ending, so you better hurry and finish the book, because there's a lot more at the end. But anyway, but I won't give it away. But anyway, but anyway, that was the way I read it.
Cool. Anybody else see that?
Let me ask Jane. So how do you connect with Ames?
Well, Ames is just an old crab. That's what I think of him. He's just a crabby old mom. He's just a crabby old man. I don't know. That's the way.
It's just so Ames is Reverend Bowton's good friend and colleague, who lives, I don't know, next door or down the street or something. So it's interesting that you describe him as an old crab. I wouldn't describe him that way.
Well, how would you describe him?
I guess in part, so the Gilead book, gives us Ames's story, and I don't know, Ames in relation, Bowton is always forgiving Jack for everything that he does. He's even finding ways to blame himself for stuff that Jack does. And Ames he never buys into Jack's repentance, I don't think. Never believes it to be genuine, and I think resents the pain that Jack has caused to his dear friend, Reverend Bowton. I don't know, but maybe he is crabby. Maybe
Well,
I don't know.
but and the father is the father of the prodigal. He's exactly like the biblical father, who welcomes him with open arms and take and give him everything. Put shoes on his feet and let's have a feast. And that's the way the father in the prodigal son does. So he's so that's the way I see him. And then crabby old Ames is the elder brother. That's just the way I see him. Perhaps he's more nuanced, but I just think but well, if I knew somebody that acted like that, I just think they were an old crab. So don't get that way, Damon, or I'll think you're an old crab.
It might be too late, Jane.
You're a young crab.
Yeah. I don't know what others think of Ames.
Well, Ames is just an old minister who believes differently than his good friend. And he gets his basis from his father and even his grandfather. And they're good congregationalists. And maybe he's crabby, but he does see Jack in a different light than Jack's father, certainly. He's not too trusting of Jack, and he thinks he does a lot of bad things. Yeah, that's no question about that. Yeah. But I don't see him as the older brother, that's for sure. No. And then I see a real similarity between Jack and Glory. They're not dissimilar in their lives and what they've gone through.
When I went away to college, my dad was always fighting in Presbyterian with Freddie Udlock. I don't know, you probably never heard of him, and then I went away to college and Udlock was there. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hope he doesn't realize that I'm Tom Murray's daughter. And I was walking across campus. He said, "Are you Tom Murray's daughter?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Oh, your dad and I, we sparred many a time, but I love that old Irishman." And so I was relieved because, that's the way a lot of ministers do. They spar a lot, but they don't, but it's good spirited some of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting to me because Bowden, in his old age, seems really unwilling to rethink things. He seems to think that he's got everything sort of figured out, and at one point in time, Jack and Glory, they notice some sort of inconsistency in his theology, and they kind of decide, it's not worth pointing it out to him because he's just gonna get all cranky about it.
And some of the events going on, seems to me they're talking about, there's the beginning of the civil rights, the awareness of the need for civil rights. And yet Jack's father is kind of wishy-washy. He's not, and neither of them are saying, yeah, we really got to fight this. We really got to get our church involved. They're kind of, oh yeah, well, so what?
Yeah, he's indifferent at least, if not slightly hostile against it. He says that he thinks that the African Americans aren't really doing themselves any favor by creating all this commotion, at one point. And he says that they'll all need to kind of straighten up or something to that effect.
And there's one passage that's just so ironic, where someone is trying an African-American is wanting to go, I think it's to the University of Alabama. And there are protests against this. And what Reverend Boughton says is, well, if these people, want to be accepted, they need to improve themselves.
Yeah.
Well, for heaven's sake, I mean, isn't that why people go to college? I mean, and he doesn't seem to realize that he's not making any sense.
Now, which one of them makes that argument? Is that Ames or I don't remember.
That's Bowden.
Okay,
Bowden.
it's Bowden.
Bowden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, he's wrong.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
He is.
But what he doesn't seem to realize is how inconsistent he's being. He's not only wrong, he's so sort of dorkily wrong.
Is that a word in the dictionary?
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Yeah, and it just and it heightens the tension between Jack and his
Yes.
father, right? That,
Yes.
Because
For
Jack
sure.
Jack has been involved with an African American woman in St. Louis, Della, and
I thought that
and his
was
dad
going to be a
doesn't know him.
surprise at the end.
Well, I was going to say that hasn't come out in the story yet, though.
Well, then I won't tell you what happens then, but you better hurry and finish the book so we can talk about that part.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't come out in this book, but it was revealed. Those of us that read Gilead,
Yeah, it
was
is revealed there.
Oh, I forgot. That I had forgotten.
Yeah.
But,
So
yeah. Anyway.
yeah.
And of course, so many of the things that Boughton says really sting if you're aware that Della is African American and that this is the woman that Jack loves.
Mhm.
In his amazingly well, inept is not even the word, but it's not exactly one of these love relationships that runs smooth.
Well, and it was in the 50s. No wonder her father is angry, because that's going to cause a lot of trouble for the family, because they were not accepting. And at one point they talk about having to drive and go and they had to get out of Iowa because they had to get to someplace safe before it got dark. And I read once that somebody published the Colored Traveler's Guide, and they listed the places that they could safely stay, and Grand Island was one of them. They had certain homes because they couldn't go to motels, and they didn't, and they had to get off the street. So, but that's and I can't imagine in Missouri an interracial couple being
No. And of course, the other thing is, Jack would have known that.
I know, yeah.
I mean, when he, as I've said this before, but when she dropped the papers and stuff, he should have picked them up and handed them to her and tipped his hat and then kept on going, because that was not a relationship. I mean, it wasn't their fault, but that was not a relationship that could thrive.
That would be safe. I have to think that I was growing up in small town Iowa in the late 50s and 60s. And I remember my brother was apprenticing in the summertime as a plumber's assistant, somebody that we knew in our church who was a plumber. And so he had a summertime job helping him, and he came home, and I remember him telling at the Christmas or around the dinner table, his surprise in that somebody that they were helping in their home telling about how they had hosted a traveling group of people. We were affiliated with the University of Iowa, and that my dad was good friends with the head of the theology department. there. And so for pulpit supply, he would often help us. And lots of times if there were touring groups of musicians, they would come to our church. And so anyway, we had hosted somebody there on Saturday night, and this was one of the parishioners who hosted, and they were talking about how wonderful it was to have this group of colored people come in and sing for us, and how open-minded she felt that she was. And then she ended it by saying, of course, I burned the sheets after they left. That happened.
Yeah.
That happened. And
Boy.
that seems like, I can't believe that it did, but I remember sitting around the table, and my parents' view on that was to be, that isn't a view that we would have, but that we should be compassionate because they grew up in another time. This was an older couple, and that we shouldn't be judgmental. So I did appreciate my parents, but I remember hearing that and think, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
Well,
it
Hastings in the 50s was a segregated town. We had a student from Bolivia, and the dean of the college had to go with him to the barber shop, or they wouldn't cut his hair. And First Street was a line, and colored people could not go on Second Street. They had during the war, there were some stationed there, and they had bars and stuff on First Street, but they weren't welcome on Second Street. And then a guy in our church, his name was Dr. Glenn. And these signs started popping up, white trade only. And so he started this campaign, all citizens welcome, and to try to battle it, because it was a battle in Hastings, because it was a deeply prejudiced time.
yeah, it was dangerous, right?
Mhm.
And there's this sense to me that Reverend Bowden only sees the things that he wants to see, right? And only picks out the story that he wants to pick out. Because related to that conversation, Jack asks him if he's heard of Emmett Till. And he says, well, yeah, that was when he only knew the version of the story that made it okay for Emmett Till to be killed. He didn't know the real version of the story. And then kind of when he hears it, he just kind of dismisses it. It doesn't fit the narrative that he has in his head. And so, well, there must have been something more, he says. And it's interesting for the minister to be unwilling, I think, to see the sin of the world and unwilling to recognize it as sin. And his wayward, prodigal, non-believing son sees it really easily.
Yeah.
I wonder what would happen if they moved to St. Louis and were in a predominantly Black community. What would happen? Would they be any more accepting because would they resent him? I wonder. Isn't that where they moved to? I think she lives in St. Louis.
Well, I think that's where they met.
And well, what would happen if they were married, if he was in a Black area and he was married and she was married to a white man? Would they be as mad at him as Black people would be at an interracial marriage? And remember, it wasn't until when was it that interracial marriage became legal? And that was a big
I think it was that the Loving decision.
Yeah,
Right.
I think that was 67.
okay,
I want
so
to
it's
say that too.
a lot later. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
55 was the Board of Education, Brown versus the Board of Education, and boy, that was wild. There were people Oh, there were riots,
Yeah.
and I remember George Wallace stood in the courthouse door, and that little, what is it? That little girl had to be
The
escorted.
schoolhouse door. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I remember what her name was. That little girl, she had to walk surrounded by marshals, and she was the only one in the school. Yeah, all the other kids dropped out.
Now it seems surreal when you see footage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. My brother was he was teaching in an African American. He was at Lincoln University, which is it was one of our predominantly Black colleges, and so he and his friend went by. He had this Black person. They were traveling somewhere, and so my brother went in and he said, "Can my brother use your restroom?" "Sure." And then this Black person walks in and he says, "That Black guy, he's your brother?" So my brother tried to explain in what sense they were brothers, but I don't think the guy really got it.
Well, we've done it again. We've gotten a half an hour into our conversation, and we haven't talked about glory. And which is interesting to me, because there's also related to that dinner scene. At the end of the dinner scene, Jack is playing piano. Robbie sits next to him.
Mm-hmm.
Jack gets up from the piano. Robbie goes to get up and notices that the lid on the piano bench opens. And so he takes a peek inside there, and then there's a whole bunch of money laying in there.
Uh-huh.
And Jack is pretty instantly worried that people are just going to assume that he's stealing money and hiding it in the piano bench. And it seems that is kind of what Ames has immediately suspected, and his dad, it seems, has immediately suspected that as well. And Gloria says, "No, I put that money there all the time. It's extra cash. It's a little bank account is what it is." And nobody really seems to believe that. And so she goes and gets the Bible. She goes and gets the big Bible, puts it on the bench, puts her hands on it, and says something to the effect of, "No one is listening to me. I swear on this Bible that I put this money there." And she has a way of holding everything together and also getting lost at the same time. It seems. So did that catch your attention, Anne?
Yeah, it did. And it caught my attention also that here is this minister's family that apparently has all this money that certainly much more than they need, and they're not like enjoying it and expanding, their own horizons with it. They're also not being philanthropic. There are all sorts of, Presbyterian related things that they could be doing with it. And it's I'm not sure exactly where to go with that, but that bothered me.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought of that. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a parable about talents.
Yeah.
That you would think that the Reverend would be aware of.
You think so, wouldn't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be another one of those little, maybe not little, hypocrisies maybe that Jack sees in his father and wants to kind of walk away from. But
yeah.
We also see in this section of the book, the car works. Jack gets the car going. and they go on a little ride.
Yes. And okay, the English professor in me really wants to read that paragraph. I wish that Daryl Lloyd were here and he could and he would read it for us, because he'd do such a good job. But I mean, it's just wonderful description at page 161. Is it okay if I read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. So I trouble with my trying to balance between my electronics and a paper book. That afternoon, when she was out in the garden weeding the strawberries, picking the handful of ripe ones, she heard the DeSoto starter straining twice, then again, then the roar of an automobile engine, the sound robust for a moment, then trailing away. Again, the starter and the engine, and after a minute or two, the rattle and pop of gravel as the DeSoto eased backward out of the barn. It gleamed darkly and demurely like a ripe plum. Its chrome was polished, hubcaps and grill, and the sidewalls of the tires were snowy white. There was a preposterous beauty in all that shine that made her laugh. Jack put his arm out the window, waving his hat like a visiting dignitary, backed into the street and floated away, gentling the gleaming dirigible through the shadows of arching elm trees, light dropping on it through their leaves like confetti as it made its ceremonious passage. After a few minutes, she heard a horn, and there were Jack and the DeSoto going by the house. A few minutes more, and they came back in the other direction, swung into the driveway, and idled there. Jack leaned across the front seat to open the passenger door. She walked across the lawn to the car and slid in. I mean, I just think that's just a wonderful piece of description.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Like the light, the leaves falling like light. It's beautiful. There's some beautiful descriptive language.
Well, and I'm if I have an idolatry, it's probably cars, and so that description kind of triggered. I'm in these Facebook groups where I'm always bombarded with pictures of wonderful old cars like this one that I could just bring a trailer and for hundreds of thousands of dollars they'd be mine, that sort of thing.
I really never, I can't imagine that.
And here we have a thing that Jack actually fixes.
Yes.
Jack actually improves something.
Yeah, he does he always tries to be helpful, all of the time. And so he's,
Well, and the stuff, I mean, if you've ever waxed an old car, I mean, if you've ever dealt with that chrome and cleaning white walls, I mean, he has really put a lot of effort into this.
Yeah, and it keeps his hands busy.
But he does not redeem himself. It's just for show.
Do you think it's just for show, Mary?
I do.
Why do you think that?
I'm just not a fan. I just feel like I don't think there's much. He reminds me of someone that I knew years ago. And I think, this is one of the one exception that I feel like in Marilynne's writing, I can even sense being around this guy, Jack, because he so reminds me of someone else. And unfortunately, this guy that I'm thinking about, he was very bright, but he had no character. He had no integrity. And I guess I feel that way about Jack. Maybe I'm writing into this unfairly, but I just do feel that way about Jack. He just doesn't. Yeah. I'm so suspicious of anything that he does, any gesture he makes. I'm thinking, what? Yeah. What do you have? What's in it for you?
Yeah. Well, I think we so often feel that way because that's how all of the other that's how all the characters in the novel, like nobody really seems to know what they can think or make of Jack, right? And so all of their uncertainty gets passed along to us.
He has to get, and he has to try to disabuse people of their attitude toward him because he was such a terrible kid. And I think part of that he's trying to show them that he's not as bad as he was. And there's always going to be a suspicion. And like when they break in, there's a break in and somebody steals money, and then immediately he's afraid that the police are going to come and question him. But it wasn't, they catch the people that did it. But I think it would be a terrible thing. You can't really put your past behind you ever.
Nope. Not if you're living in the town of, I don't know how many people live in Gilead, but can't be more than 600.
Is there a real town of Gilead in Iowa?
I don't. We looked this up last time. I don't remember.
I don't think so.
You don't think so? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
I think where my wife was from originally, Tabor. Apparently, Gilead is based loosely on Tabor in southwest Iowa, and on the Underground Railroad, a whole bunch of other stuff like that.
Oh, really?
But loosely based on Tabor, pretty loosely.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Jack, he's an interesting fellow, and he is so much different apparently than all the other kids, except I really do think Jack and Glory are very similar in what they've gone through, with her having this supposed husband that she never really had. And she never told anybody, and then she finally fessed up to Jack, and Jack has been fessing up to her on stuff, and they're really finding a link that they never thought was there, but yet it kind of is. It's really a strong link, I think. And I think they support each other in kind of a strange way, but they do support each other. They really do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Glory seems to be the person who knows Jack kind of in his realness, I suppose, the best. Bowden he's just gonna forgive him all the time, right? Ames sees the scoundrel all the time, and Glory seems to kind of see both at once. Yeah, which is interesting, perhaps.
Kind of along the same line, on page 154, Jack and Glory are talking before that about the baby, and I think, the child that passed away, and the father is feeling bad about that, I think, for not baptizing that child. But on 154, Glory is making excuses for Jack. You were young, and, so there were always excuses. And I thought it was interesting that Jack's like, don't make excuses for me, because he said they make me feel like I'm losing hold, but he couldn't explain it at the top of the page. So I don't know. He says, I might start believing them sometime. So I think he knows he was wrong, and he doesn't want people to make excuses for him, but Glory's trying to make him feel better. Is that what she's trying to do there?
Yeah, I think so. I think she's I think at times she sees Jack as being too hard on himself in some ways, or because he says I'm a scoundrel, I'm I'll never not be a screw up, essentially. And, you know, and she also, in that conversation, she says, you know, there was more than shame in this child, that you're not just those things. You're not just your mistakes. You know, that you're more than those things. But he seems to, he'd say that he needs or wants someone to hold him accountable for stuff.
But it kind of seems like they never really did. Is that correct? I mean, the father kind of always made that excuse for him too. And I don't know. Anyway, I just thought it was
Yeah.
interesting. Glory was
Yeah.
to make him not feel so guilty when he didn't want her to.
Mhm. Yeah, I think there's something about, I think he's kind of worried that if folks start to make excuses for him again, then he'll believe those excuses and he'll start sliding into those behaviors, you know. And I think he's ultimately worried about maintaining his sobriety, it seems to me. And if folks start making excuses for him, then pretty soon it'll be okay for him to sneak off to the bar or to do whatever, right?
You know, I do see those things going on, Damon, but I see a kind of parallel impulse with Glory to try to get Jack to forgive himself so that he can then move on and maybe be a different person, you know, a person that he can accept. I see a little of that, I think, in that passage. I mean, these are really complex, interesting relationships, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's interesting that you kind of phrase it as trying to get him to forgive himself, because that takes me back to Bowden always preaching about forgiveness, and that connection that Bowden made between forgiveness and understanding, and that I forget which way he had it. The common wisdom is that forgiveness leads to you have to understand to forgive, I think. And Bowden says, no, you have to forgive to understand. And if Jack needs to forgive himself in order to understand himself, that's an interesting connection.
I also kind of feel like Jack depends on Glory a little bit to help him with his sobriety. It's like, keep me company until the bar's closed, so I don't slip back.
Yeah, and she tries real hard not to worry too much when he steps out of the house and is out for a cigarette for longer than she thinks that it would maybe really take to smoke a cigarette, and she has to resist the urge to go and look at the porch to see if he's there or not. Yeah. Also, did I read this right, that Teddy did all of Jack's work in college?
Well, a lot of it anyway. Since Teddy was skipped 2 grades in school, he was in college at the same time as Jack. Yeah.
Gotcha.
But that's another relationship. I mean, that could have ruined Teddy's life. I mean, not just Jack's life, but Teddy's life, for Jack to not just to ask him to do it, but to let him do it. I mean, just boggles my mind.
Mhm.
Yeah, but then Teddy went to find Jack when Jack was in St. Louis or wherever he was. And Teddy looked him up,
Yeah,
Mhm,
trying to help him,
right.
and basically gave
Yeah.
up the project. He couldn't help him.
Well, Jack asked him to stay away.
Thanks, Matthew.
Yeah.
And we do have in this part of the novel, Glory finally kind of confronts Jack about not coming home for their mother's funeral. It just kind of occurred to me, and I kind of forget how Jack responds to that, because I think she asks, because at some point he says that he's been doing well, which I take to mean that he's been sober for 10 years. And she says, well, then you would have been sober when mom died, and you could have come home. And
Yeah.
and why didn't you? It would have meant so much to Dad, I think, that she says. When it would have meant so much to everybody, I imagine. But
Do you remember what page that was on? Because I'm trying to remember what his reason was. I know he spent the money on a suit,
yeah.
but I don't remember if he ever gave her, if it was just he was ashamed. I don't remember what his reason was.
yeah, oh boy. I don't remember. I'll hunt for it here for a little bit. Though I suspect that it was shame that kept him away. It's also, I don't know what was going on in Egypt at the time that that Boughton was so worried about, but it was before the haircut. I think everybody gets a haircut. Jack almost goes to church, but then can't bring himself to do it. Yeah, I can't find it right now. But at any rate, sorry, Lois.
That's okay. I was just trying to remember what he did say to her as a response to that question. I just don't remember.
Okay.
Oh, something else that I want to mention that I think that happens in this passage, you know, speaking of the way that the characters are alike and similar. Jack comes to this dinner wearing one of his father's suits, and he then looks like a, you know, too thin and tired version of his father. You know, I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, what do you make of that, Anne?
Well, I think part of it is that Jack and his father are actually more alike than certainly Boughton would want to acknowledge, at least at this point.
Can you say more about that?
Well, I've have to think about it longer, but
Yeah.
Some of the ways that Boughton responds, for instance, to the civil rights activity. I mean, they strike me, I mean, as shallow and, you know, like unchristian. And we certainly see a lot of shallowness in Jack.
Yeah.
That would be just one thing that would come to mind. Well, and I mean, and also, Jack is not a believer, but he's very interested in theology. You know, he's a studious, you know, Bowden is bright, Jack is bright. And I think as the novel continues, we see Bowden become more and more selfish in ways that are, again, I think a little similar to Jack.
Mhm. Yeah, I was glad.
And I'm sure there are other things too, but
Yeah.
those occur to me at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was glad that you all pointed out to me how Bowden is often described in sort of childlike ways. And I saw more of that in this section of the novel, in particular when they're preparing the Sunday dinner and they pull his seat into the kitchen so he can sit and watch while they're making dinner. And then when they get to the dinner table, he says, "I helped," which is like what a child would say when they're like, "Oh, come and help me make pie." And they really just kind of stand there and they play with the dough a little bit. Or I used to help Dad wash dishes all the time. I remember that. And yeah, and Bowden says, "I helped," in the same way that, you know, that a child would say that they helped. So I was very glad that you pointed that out to me. And children are notoriously selfish, right?
Yeah.
So if he's, you know, becoming more and more like a child, then it would make sense to me that he's becoming more and more selfish. In his
But
tone.
Damon, I as an old person, I always like to think, you know, okay, we're going to have Thanksgiving dinner at my daughter's in Omaha, and I like to think that I can help. You know, she's going to do the whole thing, but I'm going to bake the pies because I still like to think I can do something, because you feel, you know, feel pretty useless. You know, used to have them all at my house and I'd do the whole thing and make pies and people would bring stuff. And that I can't do that anymore. And that's really, you know, you just want to, hey, I can help. Look at me, I help. You know, it's kind of, I'm kind of at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And Jane, I would just say, you know, this is a little aside, but for those of us who might be in transition,
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah.
of that, how many years? I used to have the family Thanksgiving. I used to play host for that. And I can't tell you how many years. I
Yeah.
felt so guilty during that prayer that was said at the table, because I was so filled of, yeah, everybody else is around the table so grateful. You know what? I would love to have a night's sleep, because I've been working 8 hours a day at my job, coming home and wrestling with getting everything ready, the house clean, the children ready, all the food ready, and somebody brought a pie. Yeah, so that is fun. Now I'm the one who's bringing a pie. And I'm loving it because I sleep the night before.
Yeah, it's crazy. But I don't know. When you get old, there's a helplessness. You like to feel that you're still doing stuff. And oh, I had my grandson and his fiance came, and I had some things ready, and they said, no, Grandma, you just sit still, we'll get everything together. And I think, yeah, that's really nice, but you know, this is my house and my kitchen, and you know, I should really be doing this. You know, there's a sort of helplessness, and you feel oh, come on. I don't want to, I
Yeah,
don't want to admit that I'm old and I can't do stuff.
yeah. Well, that feeling of helplessness, that might be another way that Boughton and Jack are similar in some ways. If Boughton is feeling this sort of sense of helplessness, there's certainly a number of times where Jack seems to feel helpless in situations, and that he's doing everything that he can to just maintain where he is. And there's this sense of things are just about to get out of control on him at all times. And maybe Reverend Boughton is feeling something similar himself. Maybe not. Maybe we'll find out when we read the rest of the novel.
Now, what pages are we going to be responsible for next time?
Well, next time,
Yeah.
it's essentially about 50 pages a week.
Oh,
So
Oh, listen, it helps if you just read the whole damn thing. Excuse me, I'm sorry, but
I can't.
Really, it really, hurry up and read it, because there's a lot of good stuff to talk about that we can't talk about now, and I'm just dying to tell you stuff. So finish the whole book, and because it really, there's lots more to talk about. Okay, but what are the pages, Damon?
So next week, we'll be up to page 250. And next week, again, will just be a pre-recorded conversation. So
Okay. So I won't get mad that I can't participate.
No, please don't.
But I wish you guys, there's so much to talk about. If we read the whole damn book, it's really,
we will, Jane.
Okay, but I want to hurry everybody. Just read the book, it isn't that long. Forget what Damon wants you to do. I'm telling you, read it to the end. Don't listen to Damon.
And with that, we'll draw things to a close, I think, for this evening.
And thank you,
Jane,
Damon. Thank you for putting up with us all.
Jane, next time I get to preach, I'll preach, and then you come up to the pulpit right after and offer that little soliloquy. And
happy to. Oh, listen, Damon, I gotta
don't listen to a damn thing this guy says.
I gotta tell you, the best line in your sermon that has everybody chuckling is that we have more, more bathrooms than butts. I tell you, everybody loves that.
Yeah.
Do another zinger the next time, okay?
We live in houses with more bathrooms than butts.
And you said butts from the pulpit in a Presbyterian church. Oh, the shame.
I did. But I was wearing an academic robe when I did it, so.
Oh, have you no shame?
Yeah. Well, now that we've aired some of the dirty laundry of First Presbyterian Church on the internet for everyone seeing here. So next week's conversation will be another one of our pre-recorded conversations, which you can view and enjoy at your
and not participate in
or at your leisure. That is correct. And then our next not in person in quotes, our next sort of live conversation like this will take place on Thursday, October 28th. Again at 6:30 p.m. and
just before Halloween.
That's right. And I will we'll use the same Zoom link every time, but I'll resend it to you again just to make sure that you have it and that it's easily at hand. So any Jane aside, any other last thoughts or comments that
Discrimination.
folks want to get in here? Hold on a second. There we go. Any last thoughts or comments that folks would like to get in?
Nothing for me. Just thank you, everyone. Thank you, Damon, and everybody.
You are very welcome. I did mute Jane. We'll see if she wants to unmute or not, but thank you, Jane. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Ann. Thank you, Lois. Thank you, Chief. And we'll see y'all next time. Toodaloo.
Bye. Bye-bye.